all gonna die out here, aren't we? He's gonna give us.
What do you want from us? All right. So I'm here with Andrew Evans. He is from Texas and he's a filmmaker and he's done two films that I saw, Hands of Hell and The Texas Switch. And both movies were really good. The Texas Switch just came out recently and it is phenomenal. It's a great indie horror flick. So thank you for joining us, Andrew.
Man, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you enjoying those films. I try my best with it. Especially in Texas. Texas is a huge state, and you can get lost real easy. I'm from the eastern part of it, very very small, very rural, and there's just not a whole lot of film filming here, so I'm one of the very few. So a lot of the people that I work with, I have to bring them in. My lead actress and business partner, Gianna, she's from South Carolina and she's also the writer in both films.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of work to bring them all in. LA, you kind of all packed in, or maybe even in Austin, but Austin is about 5 hours from me. So just kind of shows how big we are.
Yeah, exactly. So my
Mhm.
first question is, what led you to become a filmmaker? How did you get, what was like, how did it all begin for you?
Yeah, so I was about to hit 30 and I'm like, man, I hate everything I've done. I've been in all kind I love business, but I've been in all kinds of sales and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I want to do something that is fulfilling and that I really, really love. And I've always loved movies, and I loved entertaining people, and I'm like, well, let me figure out how I can get into the industry and learn how to make movies. Um, but around here, everybody's like, well, you don't do that. People don't do that around here. You get a regular job, you're either a teacher, nurse, oil field, something like that, and you do that. And if you're miserable, you suck it up, and that's what it is. And I didn't like that approach at all. I'm like, well, you only have one life, so you might as well make it the most fulfilling and fun as you can, And there was a guy in Longview. They were filming a movie in Longview, and I hit him up just to see, if they would even look at me. And he did. And I had one job, and I did it for free, and it was to hold a styrofoam rock for the actor to hit his head, but to hold it really, really sturdy so it didn't move, to make it look like it weighed 3 tons. And from then on, I just fell in love with it, and I learned the business side of it, and that's really what I do now, is mostly on the business side of it. I like doing crew work. I love working just because, I'm from East Texas where everybody works with their hands. So business and working with my hands, that's what I love to do.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you get involved in writing and producing? Like you said, you mentioned the business side, but what was like, is horror your favorite genre to work with in terms of, did you watch any like favorites as a kid that got you in like, this is something I want to do down the road?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a couple things. One, I look at it, there's two sides to filmmaking. There's the business side and there's the artist side. And not to say I'm not an artist, so to say, but I knew that my place was on the business side. But for, and a lot of, whether it's ego or whatever, a lot of people, when you watch these indie films, and ours is the same way, a lot of people have a lot of different jobs, as you have to, but you'll have them directing, film. I mean, they're just everywhere. But for me, I knew what was my strengths, which was business side, making deals, whether it's with agents, actors, sponsors, stuff like that. And then I needed someone else to do more of the art side, which was the writing side. I know how to come up with creative kills. I know how to say, okay, well, let's do the opposite of what people would think. Some of the reviews, no spoilers, but some of the reviews the Texas Witch had was that we didn't lead up to the kill. When you were watching it, it was like, oh, I didn't think they were going to kill him that way or kill her this way. And so that was one of the things that I really had talked to Jana about as writing, as far as writing goes, is let's not make it too predictable as far as what we're trying to do. Um, and so I knew my weakness, and so I met her, and we've just not, we've been, you know, that was about 4 years ago, and we've just been working together ever since. I'll never let my ego get too big to where it's like, oh no, 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 I got to get in here and tell everybody how to do their job. Yeah, I hire them, write the check, they do their job.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like, in indie production especially,
Yeah.
You know, I've talked to many indie actors and filmmakers, and they've always said how much it's a collaboration between all the sides and how they work well together, or they'll even, you know, and I'll tell you a recent case. I actually just interviewed some of the cast members and the director of Diablo, which just came out today, the new
Oh
action
yeah.
movie starring
Mhm.
Scott Adkins and Marco Zaror, and Scott,
Mhm.
Marco, and the director Ernesto. You know, they had come up with the story and they collaborated on how to do their characters. And then I actually interviewed the actress who plays the girl in the film, and she said like, the director actually let me come up with my own
Mhm.
interpretation of the character I was playing. So I feel like, you know, that's what I really like when it's a collaborative effort, because it makes the film worthwhile and it brings more of a natural sense of chemistry between the actors in the film and not forced. And I think that's what really works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, when me and Jonna was building a character, sometimes with indie writers, and it doesn't take credit away to say that they're less talented than Hollywood writers, but I think they're a lot more in touch with their project, as far as their heart and they feel it. And sometimes you can feel that the characters are too similar, that you can feel the writer in the characters rather than each individual one. And so that was something me and Jonna did, was let's come up with a personality of our own for each character and say, okay, well, is this what it is? But then that also came to casting to say, well, if we're not getting Brad Pitt to act or Tom Cruise, but even they kind of can act like themselves in a way. Let's
Yeah.
find actors that best fit the character instead of saying, all right, you have to carry this movie now, which can be very difficult for independent actors, depending on your budget and what they can do. Is to say, well, let's say we've got us a kind of a pothead, wanting to be a YouTube streamer. It's well, let's find a guy that kind of fits that to where we're not asking him to act as much as it just be yourself in a way. And I love Suede. Suede, you're not a loser pothead, but you did great, man.
Yeah, he did. And
Yeah.
so did China as the best friend. Like, I love
Oh
the
yeah.
scene where she says, you know,
Mhm.
if I have to choose between her and you, I'm always going to choose her. She's my best friend since childhood. She's
Mhm.
always going to come first. And I love that. And I love that part
Yep.
about her. And even
And
the boy,
that's something in today's time, you really don't see, it's, that loyalty is only as far as, whatever you can get out of it, basically, and
yeah,
that there was, she's known her since first grade, that loyalty wasn't going to break.
yeah. And I gotta say, hands up to Gianna for this movie, because compared to Hands of Hell, where she played a total psychopath, I like that she went the 180 route and played a woman who's totally flawed, not just for because her brother's missing, but I love the fact that, as you mentioned, we get to delve a bit into who she is. And for me, I love these slow burn type of movies because I want to know like who the characters are before anything gets picked up. You know,
Mhm.
this was not for me. They were not one dimensional characters. These are
Mhm.
characters who, seriously were human, and not just your typical horror characters like the tropes. And that's what, for me, that's why I loved the Texas Witch, because it was like you get to know the characters before the chaos happens. And yeah, that does take like half the film, but that's okay because it's going
Well,
to lead up to something great.
yeah, and that was something that some of the critics have mentioned, and it's different in horror movies. Usually, when that we're especially in today's time, we really get used to just start killing folks right off the bat. Let's start killing. Maybe a little bit of development, and then we start killing people. But that was intended. It wasn't like, oh, it was lazy writing, bad writing, or they couldn't come up with more people to kill or anything. Because I feel like it's more impactful. Like, I love psychology, and that's something that I've really tried to study, the psychology of horror movies, and really trying to perfect it into like a science and film. And I'm sure Hollywood has to a degree. But if you're connected to these characters, I would think their death is more impactful to you.
Yeah.
Whether it's, yes, he's dead because he was an asshole, or, oh man, that sucks. So now not only are you feeling as a viewer the fear or the grossness or whatever, but now the sadness or the joy of that character dying, instead of just a flat line of just, oh, that's scary. Oh, we go back down. And I think so far, the only way to do it is to really do a slow burn to where you develop these characters to where now you can feel, oh, my best friend's like that, or my uncle's like that, to where you can now kind of feel for them, and when they die, you're either happy, sad, or like, well, damn, that sucks.
Yeah, I felt that way about a certain movie that was released during the pandemic. It was called Triggered, and it's about nine friends who
Mm-hmm.
reunite like 5 years after high school, and then they wake up with suicide bomb vests because they're science teacher is holding a grudge because one of them apparently is responsible for the death of his son. But as the
Okay.
film, but the twist is they have to kill each other, and as if someone dies, they could steal the other person's time. They steal that person's time added to their.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I
Yeah,
remember that.
but I
Yeah,
like that film because not only did the cast like really they had never worked together before, but they showed this natural chemistry. But you get to learn as the film progressed, you get to learn more about the characters as this deadly game goes on, and you get to learn more about who the characters were in their high school days, and I think that's what helped because it really became like as you mentioned, you're either going to root for the person to die or you're going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe this person just got died and this person
Mhm.
just got killed and whatnot. And then by the end of the movie, I was really surprised at who the final person was because I was not expecting that person to be the final person, but it was, and I was like, wow, like
Mhm.
totally
Yeah,
unexpected, but great.
yeah. Well, and that was another thing, like we with the slow burn is it's the opposite of what you're used to, but also like everybody says when they read a book, the book is way better than the movie. Well, that's your interpretation of what it's supposed to be, the scenery, the characters, everybody. That's why religion with the Bible, there's so many different branches because that's their interpretation of what they understand. But I feel like when with a slow burn, you sit here and you're thinking as an audience, well, I know what's supposed to happen and I know what's probably gonna happen just by watching horror movies. Kind of like the old school, she's drying her hair off, mirror, she opens it, closes it, the bad guy's behind. Well, then the next evolution of that, well, she opens it, closes it, turns around, and he's there. Well, the
Yeah,
next thing is since we've gotten used to that, is you turn around and there's nothing there, but you've spooked yourself by anticipating that that's what's going to happen. We even made fun of that in Texas Witch, where she mentioned she's like, you can't be more of a stereotype right now, because she says,
mhm.
is someone there? So we like to poke fun of the cliches of horror,
Yeah, exactly.
and stuff like that, because it's fun, but also it helps as an audience that maybe isn't a fan of horror and then wants to poke holes in it to be like, oh, that's stupid. Why don't they just do this? Or why don't they do that? Or whatever. And the easy answer is if you put too much sense into horror, you don't have horror anymore. So you have to have people make bad decisions to a degree, but that's where this story, comes in is we know it's haunted, we know it's bad, just like Camp Crystal Lake. Everybody knows something happens at Camp Crystal Lake, but usually with them, it's the cliche, let's go party and get drunk.
Yeah.
And so, in these characters, they're kind of torn. One group's on a rescue mission. The other group is on a rescue mission, but we can have a little bit of fun because she goes swimming. We can have a little bit of whatever because I'm trying to grow my channel. And you bring those two worlds together, and so, just to where you kind of get out of the cliche of everybody's going to party, everybody's going to get drunk, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I like that concept where everything just comes together. And I will tell you, I'm going to tell you that I mentioned in my review that there was one scene that almost made me vomit, and now I'm going to reveal what the scene was. It was when they took Mallory's um, bandage off, and I
Oh
saw
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
maggots over the. I that was a scene where I just went,
Mm.
oh god, I'm going to be sick. This is just gross. That
Yeah,
was amazing special effects. Whoever was responsible for that because they did
yeah,
such a great job with that. And I swear to God, if I nearly threw up, I have a feeling that as someone who watches this movie and sees that, I guarantee they're gonna get the
yeah,
bucket at some point
yeah.
because
So Brian, he was our editor, and which I originally we didn't shoot it for VFX, and I had someone else in mind to do the editing, and it turned out they dropped out. It didn't work out, and so someone introduced me to Brian, and it turned out Brian is just an amazing VFX artist, and I didn't know that at the time. If I had known it, then I would have shot it way different to get these VFX shots. And so now that I know him going into the Texas Witch 2, there's just so much more, no limitations on what can be done from bugs to wounds, stuff like that, which we do have plans for a Texas Witch 2. We're starting to develop a story for it. So that is
awesome.
coming. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is coming. It's kind of, not to give too much away, but we want to explore more of how do you get out of there, if you're in there, which is basically the cliffhanger of the end was, maybe it's sacrificing something. And with more gore, more stuff like that, maybe, it's more of what you love the most, you have to sacrifice to the witch. So maybe it's your beauty. And if it's your beauty, gonna cut it off. So, not to give too much detail into the next one, but it is going to happen. It's going to have way more gore, but still have the concept of developing these characters in the same way, but to where if to gross out people more. I want to take it to the next level, and that the inspiration of that is the Terrifier.
Oh yeah.
They have pushed the boundaries to what is acceptable, and audiences love it. So whether it's a new
Oh yeah.
phase, independent films, or whatever it is, it's like fans absolutely love the disgusting stuff that he does. And some of it, it's like, is that acceptable or not? I don't know, but he does it and they get away with it. So, that's kind of an inspiration too. Not to say that it's copycat, but to say that, that's the direction horror's going. That's the business side of horror film, even the Final Destination, it made a bukus of money, so you see that in filmmaking on the business side is it's kind of, well, they're doing it. So kind of have to go in that direction type thing to be able to compete.
Yeah, I was actually just having a conversation with someone the other day because we were talking about back in the day when the British horror film, like they hated the horror films, like the British
Yeah.
government, they would ban all these, they call the video nasties.
Yeah.
Now that they got rid of that, I'm like, they're making up for it now. I mean, you
Yeah.
got the Twisted Childhood universe, you got all
Mhm.
these other like fairy tale horror movies now, and
Mhm.
they are not letting up on they are unleashing the
Yeah.
gore like never before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just recently watched Cinderella's Curse, and there was a scene where Cinderella is grabbing her stepsister, and the stepsister's like, I can't wear the slipper. It's too, my feet are too big. She goes, oh, so it is. So she grabs some pair of scissors and cuts her toes off, and they show it in graphic. Man, I'm like, holy! I was like, damn. So
Oh man, I love it.
like the Brit, like yeah. I'm like these British filmmakers are now like, you know what? They took out the ban on the horror films. We're going all out, and I'm glad they're
Yeah.
doing it,
Yeah.
especially with
Well,
the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and I know they're
yeah.
all public domain
Yeah.
films, but I
Yeah.
mean, they're just making up for what they lost a long time
Yeah.
ago, and I'm glad they're doing that as well.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
get how it
for
is.
me, yeah, for me, it's like, I grew up when I really started watching horror movies, which it tells my age a little bit, is in the late 90s and early 2000s, like House on Haunted Hill, Ghost Ship, The Grudge, The Ring. That's really the era when I really started getting into horror movies. So it's more paranormal.
Okay.
And and the Texas Witch is paranormal, and there's a different way, but I really enjoy paranormal horror. But
Yeah.
a lot of modern day paranormal horror isn't necessarily very gory. You got your Annabelles, the Nun, Conjurings, and stuff like that, where those are spooky movies. I love them. They're great. I love James Wan. But as far as paranormal, it's not like House on Haunted Hill or Ghost Ship, where there is blood and guts and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so even the 13th Ghost, so I was watching those, and so I really I'm wanting to do more of that paranormal gore stuff, but not, even with the first Blair Witch, it wasn't a whole lot of gore though, but it was
No.
paranormal. So early 2000s had a lot of paranormals.
Yeah, and well, this is my era. My era is before you. I'm
Mhm.
an '80s child, so I grew up watching the '80s B movies, and then we had the Nightmare on Elm Street,
Slashers.
the slasher. I was in the
Uh-huh.
slasher genre,
Mhm.
and in my lead, and I didn't get to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre until finally I was like 12, and that to
Mhm.
this day is my all-time favorite horror film. And I
Mhm.
feel like it's not even. It's everyone says, "Oh, it's a slasher. It's gory." No, it's not. I go, it's a psychological. I consider it a psychological horror film because that
I
movie
agree.
messes with your head so much in
Mhm.
terms of the visuals and that one shot of Sally's eyeball like really up close.
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh,
No,
it's
that's a classic. Yeah, yeah. You got good taste. I love it.
but yeah, I grew up with like those. I grew up with the slashers and my first in the zombie genre, the Living Dead movies as
Right.
well. So I grew up with those. So yeah, I totally get how it is. You mentioned you
It's
were
when you're growing up that era, to say, what is it, and but no, but I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I made a joke to someone. It's like if I had about $2 or $3 billion, their rights are up right now. So I was like, I can
yeah,
own the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Texas Witches. All of Texas horror could be under my name, but unfortunately, I don't have about $3 billion to get them.
yeah,
But
that's pretty crazy.
for
Yeah,
me, which I watched some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres when I was little, but really it became popular to me whenever they with Jessica Biel, and then when they did the remake in '03, and then a prequel in like '04, '05, something like that. I like those. Those were good. But that's the thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. because while we filmed the Texas Witch where we did, it's an old town. A lot of people say it's haunted. There's a place called the Kilo Monument not too far away, which is where the white settlers were massacred by the natives when they first settled there. They say that's haunted. Not too far away, which we filmed in the town, which the gas station scene where they stop and get some snacks and whatever,
Yeah.
about half a mile away from there, if that, is they call it Rusk State Hospital, which is a mental institution for people that have committed horrible crimes, but they can't go to prison because they're mentally whatever. So they go there. And when I was growing up, they always said that's where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy was that he was in that hospital. And because everybody here thinks it's based on something real because of the
Yeah.
names, locations, and most people don't know it. There's very little truth to it, especially now that it's been passed down through the generations. It's like, okay, well, it's not. But people around here still, whether it's campfire tales or whatever, still believe that there's something real to it. And so with the Texas Witch, we wanted to kind of build a very similar idea to say, well, there's a lot of witchcraft in the area. Whenever I Googled the Texas Witch, the AI Google popped up a combination of my movie and someone that was practicing witchcraft about maybe 20 minutes from there. And so it tied those two stories together. And I'm like, well, that's what I wanted, was for people to kind of build their own imagination of how true this can be and build your own campfire story of when you hear that noise in the woods and you live in Texas, is that her? Just like when I was growing up, it was the same thing with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was when you heard something, it was that's them, that's the family, they're watching you. They've been hiding out for all this time and they're still waiting to kill people.
That's crazy. Yeah, it reminds me of, because I'm from originally from New York, and
Hmm.
we had the Cropsey legend.
Hmm.
We had the story of Cropsey, and that was like apparently an influence for the movie The Burning, which is the
Hmm.
Friday the 13th ripoff. But
Right.
everyone
Yeah.
calls it the Friday the 13th ripoff. But apparently it's based on a campfire story of Crops, though this was an actual person named Cropsey. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I've
Hmm.
heard those stories as well as a kid, and
Hmm.
yeah, so I totally get it. And then my hometown, there was, oh my God, there was this urban legend that there's this pathway behind our high school and middle school that leads to the college, like the local college there. And apparently at one point, like many moons ago, there was like a shack there, and there was like a serial killer that was living there at the time. And I've
Hmm.
heard so many rumors about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true or if it's just a campfire tale, but that used to still like yeah, that's where Pete used to live. That like killer's name was
Mhm.
Pete, apparently. He's like, that's where
It
he
keeps
was.
it fun though. It keeps it fun, no matter how truthful it is or how much the story changes. Like, because we border with Mexico, there's the Curse of La Lorena,
Yeah,
so that bleeds into our culture as well to say, is she here? When you hear a weeping woman, that's her, so it's so cool to be able to have these different stories and stuff and to play on the imagination, even if it's just talk, but a lot of people, it had to start from somewhere. Something had to happen for someone to be able to come up with the story. You know, um, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, their inspiration came from a guy. I think he was from Wisconsin.
yeah,
That
Ed Gein.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so that they built that story. So there is some truth to it to some degree. Something terrible did happen for that
Yeah.
to be inspired.
Yeah, I read. Yeah, I was watching a documentary on it. I think Toby Hooper said like he based that character on Ed Gein, and then with the bones and the furniture and the
Mhm.
human skin over the lampshades. But also, he came up with the chainsaw idea when he went Christmas shopping. He saw
Mhm.
like the whole place was packed, and he was at a
Mhm.
hardware store. And he saw these chainsaws. He goes, "What if I just grabbed the chainsaw and just ran through these people?" And
Yeah.
that was one of the inspirations behind the movie. That's what I had heard anyway.
Well, so what made me think of what I'm about to say is like you mentioned, most horror movies, especially slashers, and I'm going to talk about Hands of Hell on this one.
Yeah,
They have their key weapon, right? Scream has a butcher knife, so to say. Michael Myers Halloween has a kitchen knife. Jason has a machete. Texas Chainsaw has a chainsaw. So most of your slashers stay pretty true to what they have. And so with Hands of Hell, with these two killers, it was, well, let's do something different. Let's kill in different ways, and whether it's with chainsaws, knives, meat tenderizers, all these
yeah,
different things, and so it's really fun. A lot of people in Scream, I think it was what, Scream 6, he brought out a shotgun and everybody's
yeah.
like, oh, what? He don't kill that way. What? It's like, whoa, 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 it's just a horror movie. Let him kill however he
I
wants
know.
to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love when they use different, and then of course you mentioned their trademark weapons. You know, we also got Slumber Party Massacre with the power drill and
Right.
that whole genre. And I
Mhm.
recently saw I love the reboot because they did something different, completely different
Mhm.
with it. They gender reversed the tropes. Made the guys more the
Right.
screen
Yeah.
queens and
Mhm.
and whatnot. And they had that little twist at the end, which was like I
Mhm.
was not expecting how they did that, but I think it was ingenious. I like when reboots do something a little different because
Mhm.
they don't, so it's not a carbon copy of the original. I think
Yeah.
that's why I like some movies like that because they like to
Mhm.
play along with it and do something different.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's to like there's so much competition. A lot of people don't compare it to the competition, but it is competition because you can, as a fan, you can only watch so many movies in a day. And so you have to say, well, what will make me watch this movie versus this movie? And you're competing against Hollywood, where they've got a lot of money to just constantly be making sure you see whatever they've got going on. And I think a lot of indie filmmakers, it's not that their product isn't good at all. It's good, but they don't know how to market it to a lot of people
Yeah.
or how to get as many eyes. And that was something that I wanted to try that was different. A lot of people say, well, you got to get named talent in it. You got to get named talent. And that's so subjective to say, well, what is named talent nowadays? And so, like with Hands of Hell, it's full of people that are on TikTok with tens of millions of followers. And so I don't have tens of millions of dollars to promote like Hollywood. But now I've got the ability with them to market it to now reach tens of millions of people. And with the Texas Witch is a little different. We got people that are big within their realm. So let's say like Justin, for example, he plays for Three Doors Down. So if I was to say, hey Justin, I need you to play some music. Well, that's going to cost a lot more than if you say I want you to act, including Neil McCoy, which Neil McCoy was huge in the '90s, huge country singer. Um, and he's still well known, but he's not. It's not what it was.
Yeah.
Still a huge following though. To get him in there. Just people like that then to promote it. Because I know some people. I know a guy that had gotten Kevin Nash in a movie, which Kevin Nash is known, especially
Oh
if
yeah.
you're a wrestling fan.
Oh yeah. Diesel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
doesn't promote. Yeah,
Yeah, I
but he
think I might
doesn't
have
promote
seen.
his films.
I think I've seen the horror film he was in. If I remember, I think
Yeah,
it was like River of Death or something. He played like a zombie with like Psycho Sid and
yeah,
like I've seen those. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love watching those type of movies.
Yeah, yeah. There was one he did. They filmed it around here. It's something to do with COVID or something.
Oh yeah, I saw that one too. I think it was called Lockdown or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, 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 yeah. And
Yeah, I
it's
did
so I
see that
started
one.
thinking, and I actually talked to the producer on that one, and we had talked about how much it cost to get him, and so that's when I started really rambling. My brain was like, okay, well, it cost X amount of dollars to get Kevin Nash, who doesn't promote on his social media pages typically as far as his movies go. So you would have to be a die-hard fan to keep track of him or see his name and be like, okay, I'm scrolling and there he is. I want to watch him because I'm a die-hard fan. But I'm like, well, would it be more beneficial to pay the same amount of money for people that may not be as known? If I say, oh, do you know, Kingry? You may not know him, but he's got 10 million people that do, and on his social media pages. So that was something that I was dabbling in to say, okay, well, is it, which way do you go as far as marketing? It does name talent still carry its weight like it used to, or does like social media influencers carry more weight nowadays, especially for the younger audiences, that are coming up, anywhere between that, maybe, I don't know what kids are watching nowadays. I don't have any kids to say when do they start watching horror movies, but that young generation, that are into TikTokers, how do you get them, type thing.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
song, and I think it's true. It's like they said, video killed the radio star.
yep.
I think
Yep.
social
Bubbles.
media influencers killed Hollywood.
Yeah. I do have kids, and two of them are really into horror films, like as much as I
Mhm.
am now. And the first, now 15-year-old, she saw Sleepaway Camp when she was 10 years old for the first time.
Oh,
I
okay.
showed her.
Yeah.
She says that's to this day it's still one of my favorite like horror films.
Mhm.
And I like the fact, I do like seeing these new name act, like I would rather see like someone who's like virtually new to the scene than
Yeah.
like a name, because
Yeah.
it's going to make me wonder, can they break out is this going to be like a genre they get into, or maybe they'll be in a couple another film of another genre to see if they could be versatile. Like I
Right.
always like looking out for like new faces because I always like to, if they do well enough, I like to like bump them up. I recently just did that with there was a British actor named Lewis Santer, and he played Tigger in Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. Then I just saw him this year in Mouse of Horrors, where he played the Steamboat Willie like killer. And then I just saw him in another film called Fairest of Them All, where he's the Mad Hatter, and he brings this charisma to the three roles, these three particular characters. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy's a face to look out for. This guy needs to be in more horror films, and he's virtually new to the scene, and he's from the UK. And I'm like, holy crap.
Well, it's one of those things too. It's like, well, I like to cheer for the little guy because I'm a little guy.
Yeah,
I want people to cheer for me, so I need to return that same energy. But it's also one of those things I look at it kind of like a stock. I love stock markets. Is if you want to get really rich, is find the little guy that's going to grow and be something, and then you have that money. And it's the same with actors. It's like, well, you never know who's going to be that big name, and whoever it is, I want to be attached to that. Just like they
yeah,
never know who's going to be that next big movie guy that's producing these films, and they say, well, I want to be attached to that too. Now, not everybody thinks in those terms, but I do. And it's the same with podcasts. I'll never turn down a podcast because you never know who's going to be the next big podcast. And it's like, well, I want to be a part of that. And I would think that vice versa, same with them, is you never know who's going to be that next big actor. And to say, well, I
exactly.
interviewed them first, type thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Like I always love talking to new talent, like people I may have seen their movies or something. Like, oh yeah, I heard about your thing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm into that because I really want to get to not just know I also want to get to know the person behind the
Yeah.
actor. Where they get their start. What's their favorite horror films or favorite genre films, whatever I'm doing. I really enjoy doing that because it's just like it's like for me, it's like you're at a bar talking to someone just shooting the breeze with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was because I've seen these journalists
Mm-hmm.
on TV, and when they interview actors, these interviews are so cringeworthy, and I'm like, I cannot do that. I was like, that is exactly what you don't want to do. Like that one guy who made Robert Downey Jr. walk out on his interview
Yeah.
because he was like getting into too personal. I'm like,
Mhm.
dude, you're supposed to be talking about a movie, not get into this stupid, this.
Well, and you could tell the difference between these people that are on Good Morning America interviewing these actors and then someone that's on a podcast.
Yeah,
When I'm like on on the Joe Rogan show, they chill, they relax, or even who was it? Shannon Sharp when he does a show. He does mostly a lot of athletes, but he got big with the whole Cat Williams thing. They're chilled, they're relaxed. You're getting the real person, real energy, real thoughts. But and I don't know if it's the people interviewing or if it's just some within Hollywood to say, well, this is how you have to hold yourself if you're going on TV to be interviewed versus a podcast. And so they put on different characters, or if it's actually the interviewer. But you could definitely see a trend where they're a lot more chill when they're on these podcasts than they are when they're being interviewed by a reporter.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's why that's why I like doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people like, all right, listen, this is like I want to get to where I'm actually knowing the person and
Mm-hmm.
get to understand like what they love about the film and whatnot. And that's where it really works. I've been doing this now for I want to say a good 10 years total, like
Hell
almost 10
yeah,
years.
man. That's
So
awesome.
it's
Yeah.
a lot of fun, man. I just and once the Zoom era hit, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so much better because now I get
Yeah.
to actually see the person, not just talk to them on the phone, but now I
Yeah.
get to go face to face with them, and it
Mhm.
just makes it more comfortable.
Yeah. I love it, dude. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and that's another thing. Everybody has different dreams, different goals and stuff. And I'm a true believer that whatever our goal is and whatever our dream is, it will be accomplished as long as you don't quit. That you
Yeah,
may be
exactly.
60, you may be 60, you may be 50, you may be 40. I don't know how old you'll be, but anybody that's chasing their dreams, you will make it. Just don't quit.
Exactly. Yeah, I had written when I started doing writing about films, I actually contacted a film critic. I asked for
Mhm.
advice. He goes, keep writing. That's all you gotta do. Keep
Yep.
writing and
Mhm.
whatnot. And that's what I just like, what, I followed his advice. I kept writing, and here I am all these years later. Now I'm doing interviews and
Mhm.
reviews and whatnot. And I enjoy it. Even though I have a day job, I'm enjoying the hell out of this
Hey,
too.
hey, hey,
So
hey, do not ever get discouraged with that because
yeah, no, I
I'm
don't,
not sure
man.
if you're, yeah, I'm not sure if you're a football fan or not. Have you ever heard of Kurt Warner?
Yeah.
Yeah, so his story, he wanted to play in the NFL. He was stacking cans at a grocery store and playing arena football to make ends meet until he could get his chance in the NFL. Finally, at 28 years old, he does. Most rookies are 21, 22, 23, and here you are with a 28-year-old rookie. Now he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And that was one of those things. I'm sure people walked up to him and said, "Well, if you're so great at football, why are you stacking cans?" It doesn't matter what people think. Don't matter what you're
Yeah,
doing.
exactly.
You
Like,
know. Mhm.
and it's great too. Especially my job. I work at an academic library. They support me doing this stuff. Like if I do like during my downtime, I'll be, if I have an interview, I do it during my downtime, or I take a
Mhm.
15-minute break. My actual boss would come up to me and goes, "So who'd you interview today?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I interviewed this person. Oh, great. I'll have to check that out." It's like, that's a good support
Awesome,
system too.
dude. Yeah.
Always works.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome, and especially have that, because it can get demoralizing to say, oh, if you're so good at making movies, why you got a day job, or if you're so good at this, why don't, if you're so good at dancing, and it's all those things, and it's like, well, my advice to anybody that's going through that is look at them and ask them what they're doing.
Yep,
Like,
exactly.
what are you doing with your life? Oh, okay, you're miserable. Okay, well, tell me whenever you're not miserable, because your life ain't gonna get any less miserable, worrying about me type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
how long did Texas Witch? How long were you shooting that for?
Yeah, so I took this from the Saw franchise. Saw usually takes about 2 weeks to film, and so we take 2 weeks to film Hands of Hell and the Texas Witch. Um, However, the Texas Witch was actually our first movie. We shot it first, but it didn't come
Oh,
out until second. We had some issues with editing and post production and keeping the team together with that, and ultimately basically had to start over from scratch. And that's how I met um, Brian, who turned out to be an amazing VFX artist too. And so Texas Witch took longer than what it should have, and that Hands of Hell came out first, but was shot second.
wow. Oh, I've seen that happen
Hmm.
before. Yeah, I've seen that happen numerous times. One example I heard was there's this Hong Kong actor named Andy On, and he shot a film called Looking, like he's American born Chinese, but he went to Hong Kong to start a film career. And
Hmm.
he shot a film first called Looking for Mr. Perfect. It was just an action
Hmm.
comedy. But then they hired him for Black Mass 2 to play Black Mask, replacing Jet Li. So they released Black Mass 2 first, and
hmm
then they released Looking for Mr. Perfect afterwards. So I was like, yeah, I get that
yeah,
notion. They wanted to hype him up first as a
yeah.
superhero, and
Well,
then
yeah, I mean, weird things happen, like, and I look at it, I've been given second chances kind of with these movies, and like Hands of Hell, it did well, but we signed a distribution deal with Redbox, and Redbox is, I thought, I knew they were having some issues, but I thought, well, that's such a big brand, they're not going anywhere.
yeah,
And I was wrong. They did go somewhere. They're non-existent now.
yeah,
And
no,
so we had to get our rights back from them, and we did. And so we signed with another company. So we're going to have a re-release of Hands of Hell. Either probably they're still working on it, so I don't want to give an exact date, but it will be sometime this year. I'm hoping sometime this summer, and I'm sitting here marketing two films at the exact same time. But it's going to get a re-release, and I'm very happy with that, and very blessed to have that opportunity because a lot of people, when they have issues with distribution, whether it's they go out of business or whatever, they never get their film back. And that's the end of that film pretty much forever. And that's not the case with Hands of Hell. So it will get a new release later this year.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've heard stories like that too, and I also like the fact that lost media is starting to slowly come up back on the rise as well. You got these old horror films from like the 80s and 90s that
Yeah,
maybe they came out for like a few days and then gone for so many years, and now
right.
they're popping up again on physical media and thanks to new
Hmm.
distribution. And I'm glad that's working out as well because I just recently saw Tony Todd's Cutters Club, which was lost after like
Hmm.
20 years.
Right.
They lost the negative just when Charles Band was like, "I'm ready to do the film again." The lab was like, "Oh, we lost the negative." And 20 years passed, and Tony Todd just passed away, and they just found a negative. And it was like, "Well, I can't reshoot the film now. Tony Todd's gone, and I think another actor from
Right.
the movie had passed. He's like,
Mhm.
I'm just going to make this just work with what I have, and he made like a 1 hour 5 minute movie that just came out. I just saw it on Tubi like a couple weeks ago. So
Right.
yeah, I love seeing like this lost meat. I don't care how bad it might look at the end, but just the
Right.
fact
Yeah.
that it was once lost and now found is like amazing. So just to hear about Hands of Hell getting a re-release, it's just awesome to hear.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too is, there's a lot of reasons why for re-release, but then that's why I talk about, having value in your movie, because it's especially with distribution, that's not an art world. I mean, yeah, you have to have a good movie to a degree, but that's business, right? They want to make money, so they have to look at your movie and say, can I make money off of this? And so it's the same with the new distributors. Look at this movie, Hands of Hell, to say, okay, it released 2 years ago, basically. It's independent. There's no Brad Pitt. There's no Rock. Can I make money off of this? And for them to look at it and say, yeah, this film is good enough that I can make money off of this, or there's a marketing strategy built into it to make money. And that's what that's something that I'm trying to do is, it comes down to money. Make as much of it as you can because that helps you with investors. But also, if you don't want to deal with investors, now you have the money yourself. But also, that makes distribution easier and you can kind of negotiate those deals better because now you have something that they want, really, really want. And a lot of distributors, they'll talk about, oh, I'll put a 10K cap in there for marketing. And a lot of them aren't going to do much marketing. You need to find a way to do it yourself. And that's what I would suggest to anybody that's going to make their first movie or anything. You're gonna have mistakes. I made mistakes. I'm still making mistakes. I'm still learning. But make it as valuable as possible that when you're looking at someone that only has dollar signs in their eyes, that they can say, yes, there's money there.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, that reminded me of a filmmaker. Talk about the marketing. And there was a filmmaker. His film just came out this year called Butcher's Bluff, and he
Hmm.
did like a proof of concept. He brought this out to conventions,
Hmm.
mentioning this movie, and people are like wondering, "Is the movie out yet?" He goes, "No, I'm actually working on it as we speak." He actually
Yeah.
got the attention of some big name horror actors,
Hmm.
and they're like, "We want to be in the film. Like, we
Yeah.
want to do it." And
Hmm.
yeah, the movie finally came out I think it was like earlier this year or late last year.
Hmm.
And I saw the movie, and like he had people like Jeremy London, Bill
Hmm.
Oberst Jr. I'm like, holy cow. And he was telling me this when I interviewed him, he told me the story of how he just marketed this movie in horror conventions, and
Yeah.
people went up to him and they were so interested in it as at the concept. And and this is how he ended up getting these big like horror names and like these big
Right.
names like in the genre. And I was like, that's good marketing to pitch it
Yeah.
out there yourself,
Yeah.
especially in horror conventions. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
mind blowing that you did that and it
Mhm.
worked. So there's a big
Well, it's
success.
what I call it is turn over every stone. You never know what's underneath it. No matter how crazy it may sound, how bad you'll be judged, it ain't a bad idea, especially if it works. Nobody cares if it works. So you never know.
Yeah,
Just turn over that stone, see what's underneath there. Talk to that person, pitch it to that person. What's the worst they're going to do? Say no?
yeah,
Okay. All you need is one yes, though.
yep, exactly. So
Hmm.
um what are some of your favorite are there any recent horror films that you enjoy watching? I know you mentioned Terrifier, but there are other ones that you're like
Well,
whether
yeah.
they're high budget, low budget, zero
Yeah.
budget, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which this one may be cliche or so to say, is that, and they took a break for a while, but the new Final Destination,
yeah,
um, I enjoyed that. They had taken a break for a while. That one was actually, really fun. It was, you know, kind of, well, I guess people get tired of it eventually, and so you got to give it a break, but it was kind of a new little spin as far as don't mess with death or it'll get you anyways, type thing. So that was fun, but the humor in it was fun. I've been really busy with something I can't really talk about right now. So I've been out for a while, and so I haven't had the time to watch a whole lot of movies. Because while I was doing that, I had gotten sick, got in the hospital. So for the past 2 months, basically, I haven't watched too many movies. But of course, The Terrifier, that was absolutely just amazing to say, you know, to push that boundary of what most time you don't kill kids, even in horror movies. That's kind of that
yeah.
it does happen, but it's very. But to go as Santa Claus and give them presents and blow them up, I mean that's pretty. Out
And that
there.
shower scene, that chainsaw shower scene,
Oh,
that was my I was
oh
like I was
God.
I gotta admit, when I saw it, I was literally about to scream when what he did to the guy, and I was literally like, oh, and I'm like, I was like, I was literally about to scream, and then
Yeah.
it was so funny because at that time I saw it, Legendary had just said their Toxic Avenger reboot was like, oh, we can't release it, we can't find a distributor that's gonna release this
Mhm.
film, and I just thought in my head, you know what, Cineverse needs to release the Toxic Avenger. They need to
Yeah.
get this movie.
Yeah.
And then I find out on the day of my birthday, I was reading the news, and all of a sudden I hear Cineverse has picked up the Toxic Avenger reboot with Peter Dinklage, and I went, "Holy cow!" I was like, God actually listened to
Yeah.
me this time. Like he
Yeah.
actually heard me.
Well, I tell you, which I ain't made it yet. What I'm excited about, which I'm a huge Saw fan, and I'm a huge James Wan fan. But Lionsgate just partnered with Blumhouse,
Blumhouse. Yep.
who has partnered with Atomic
James
Monster, which is
James
James
Wan. Yep.
Wan. So now
So
James Wan comes back to the Saw universe. And so even though they haven't shot a scene yet, when I seen that news, I mean, it's going to suck because it's the iconic Twisted Pictures logo. That's not going to be in there anymore.
yeah.
But to have James Wan back and to have two of kind of the two biggest studios in horror right now with Lionsgate and Blumhouse, it's like it's a high expectations, but God, it is. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I saw another one called A Hard Place recently, and
Mhm.
I interviewed the director of that movie, and it was I love the concept, which is about
Mhm.
these robbers who, after they botched a robbery, they have to hide out in the forest, and they find these creatures during the day that start
Mhm.
attacking them, and
Mhm.
then they meet these like survivalist types, these like redneck types, led by
Mhm.
Felissa Rose of all people. And
Mhm.
it turns out at night they become creatures, they become like shapeshifters, and
Huh.
there's an eclipse coming, and it's going to
Yeah.
lead to an all-out war between both factions, so
Uh-huh.
that shapeshifters can change in the night while
Mhm.
the creatures in the day come out during the eclipse and have this all-out war with each other with these robbers like in the middle of it.
What's that called?
A Hard Place. It just came out
Okay.
like
Okay.
recently. It
Mhm.
was so good, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I'm like, "This is," and the fact that Felissa Rose is so amazing in this movie. Like I was so glad when she started to come back doing the genre films after taking
Mhm.
like a long break. So I know she
Mhm.
did Sleepaway Camp, and then I think she took like a massive long break after that. So she wasn't in the second and third, but then when they did Return to Sleepaway Camp, she returned,
Mhm.
and since then she's just been knocking it out with all these
Mhm.
horror films. She's making like 6 or 7 a year now. It's just like
Oh
crazy.
wow, yeah, yeah. See, a lot of the stuff I guess I'm looking into the future, like Welcome to Derry. That's going to be fun with it. I
Yeah,
think it's going to be on HBO Max. Like that hasn't came out yet. Of course, Saw hasn't come out yet, and then they working on a Camp Crystal Lake.
yeah, with
Like
Linda
I'm looking,
Cardellini
yeah, it's
playing
like all this
Linda
stuff I'm
Cardellini.
really wanting. It's like in the future, I'm like, damn it, come on now. But like I said, I've been kind of busy with some other things to where I haven't kept up
Yeah,
with kind of the under the radar movies lately,
yeah, and
other than
I'm
just the
also
big blockbusters. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm also looking forward to I've been watching the Twisted Childhood Universe films, so
Mhm.
I'm already up to date, and I know Bambi: The Reckoning is coming out next month.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
am
I
looking
did see
forward to
that.
that.
Yeah.
They also have Pinocchio Unstrung, which has Robert Englund in it as Jiminy Cricket, and Richard Brake is Geppetto. I'm like, how did they get how did they get these guys in this movie all of a sudden? Holy
Yeah, it's like,
cow.
well, I tell you, so this opens up something that I thought I just had a thought the other day. I was walking outside and I just thought about it. Like, so within the next decade or so, maybe 15 years, some of these like DC characters are going to be up to where they're free, like Pinocchio and stuff. Everybody's going to jump on Batman. As
Oh
soon as
yeah.
Batman's free, there's going to be horror movie Batmans, and I just wonder what that do to the genre of superheroes that now the not only are they out fighting crime with whoever may own them, or well, nobody will own them then, but fighting crime, but also horror movies killing people because someone's going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And like this year, Popeye went into public domain. There's already 3 horror films with him. I did see one. I saw Popeye's Revenge,
Yeah,
and yeah, there was only one thing I didn't like. There was only one small thing I didn't like about the film. They added a twist to like one character. I was like, oh, all right,
yeah.
that's the only bad thing. But one of the kills was so damn good. It looked like it came out of Mortal Kombat because I was like,
Oh,
what the hell? I was like, holy like when he did it, I'm like, my mouth literally dropped to the ground. Like, this is Mortal Kombat territory he just pulled.
Well, speaking
And
of Mortal Kombat, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
yeah,
Yeah, so
no.
speaking of Mortal Kombat, there's been good talk coming out around Mortal Kombat too. I'm not sure if you read any of the
Yeah, I heard like test
articles, but
screenings
they're
are like up the roof. I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
they're
it's
saying
gonna be awesome
it's
then.
gonna be damn good. You know, it's the first one I thought was really good considering that it's a remake. You know, most remakes,
Don't
kind
work.
of just but um, for considered as a remake, it was pretty good. And then now this one, I mean, getting some high expectations. Already talking about it, and ain't even released the first trailer yet.
Yeah, I think they said the first trailer's coming out next month. I think that's what I
Yeah.
heard. That's going to be out in
Mhm.
July. So I was like, all right, I'll look out for it. But yeah,
Mhm.
speaking of remakes, like I said, I love the Texas Chainsaw remake. That was great. The 2003 one. I like they
Yeah,
did
yeah.
something a little different. I actually like the My Bloody Valentine remake. A lot of people didn't, but I did. I sure did because I like the twist they did at the end. This is the
Yeah.
twist they did at the end. I wasn't expecting
You're talking about
how.
the one they shot in 3D?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was my thing. I don't. So I'm not a big 3D
I,
horror fan.
yeah. The 3D it wasn't bothering me. It's like I just like the twist at the end, like
Yeah, yeah.
when
Yeah,
the
yeah. So once you take the 3D away, how everything else about it was a good movie. But trying to watch it in 3D, anytime I'm trying to watch something in 3D is distracting. So I first watched it in 3D and I'm like, oh, this is a bad movie. This sucks. And then I
yeah.
bought it on DVD and I watched it again. I'm like, oh, this ain't bad. It must have been the 3D thing messing with me.
Yeah, exactly. Like with Texas Chainsaw 3D, I didn't care about the 3D, the 3D. But once I saw the regular without the
Mhm.
3D, I'm like, all right, it's a better move. It's better. And
Mhm.
although everyone's talking about, oh well, Heather's supposed to be 40 years old, not she's here, she is in her 20s. But I think
Mhm.
I read an interview saying the screenwriter said the movie's supposed to be set in the 90s
Yeah,
instead
that's what
of
I thought too. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what he said. I think he said it's supposed to be set in like 1993, not 2013, and people just
Right.
assumed it. But
Mhm.
I love the fact that we got in that movie Gunnar Hansen and Marilyn Burns in one of their last movies and
Mhm.
whatnot. I can't. I still can't believe they're both gone. I
Yeah.
know it's 2025, but
Well, and
they
that's the sad thing. It's like childhood's over because it's like, damn, I didn't know that person was that old. And I'm like, oh wait, I'm getting that old, type thing.
yeah,
It's kind of
exactly.
sad.
Yeah, I know. Like I think Reanimator celebrating their 40th anniversary this year, and
Mhm.
so that's another one. I love Reanimator. That was another movie I grew up with. I grew up watching Reanimator and
Mhm.
Return to Living Dead. That whole
Yeah.
franchise. So it's like, man, like horror is going to be here to stay for a
Well, it's kind
very
of like with Final Destination. What Tony Todd? He had
yeah.
passed away last year. And he was known in The Crow. I mean, which speaking of The Crow, that remake of The Crow was garbage. I love Lionsgate. I
Uh
love I love
yeah,
you,
I have
Lionsgate.
to agree with you. The only
But
scene I actually liked from that movie was the whole opera fight scene where he's just like, that's it. That's all I can watch, and like that's the only thing I can watch from the remake.
yeah,
The
it was
rest of it was
terrible. I
just
mean, it was literally terrible. I mean, it was
like
the
I,
story, everything was bad.
I almost went as far as saying I would rather watch The Crow Wicked Prayer, and I absolutely loathe that sequel. I would rather watch that again than watch
Yeah,
the remake.
yeah, it was terrible. And like I said, I love Lionsgate. I don't mean to talk ill of them, but like that was bad. That the Crow was bad.
Yeah, it was. They messed up. They really messed up bad on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I mean,
But
they
yeah,
almost made it to where the Crow wasn't even one having his powers. It was his love for the girl that made him have his powers. Basically, I'm like, so this shouldn't be called the Crow then. We should just call it the Love or something because it was just bad.
yeah, and even the TV series was better than the remake.
Oh yeah, I remember the
The one
TV
with
series. Yeah,
Mark DeCosco's playing the Crow, and
yeah, that was in
and
the '90s, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because I was a little boy, and my mom, I would go visit my grandfather. My grandfather loved The Crow, and he had it on VHS, and he'd watch it. And my mom would always say, "Don't watch that movie," and she'd tell my grandfather, "Do not let him watch the movie," but he'd let me watch it anyways. And then I remember watching the TV series as a little boy too, and I don't remember much about the TV series because I was probably 7, 8-ish years old. But the movie, I grew up on the Crow movie with Brandon Lee and all that, and so I had high expectations. But I tried to think with the remake was it's a different movie. Let's not compare, right? But it's still, regardless of who you like, Batman. Yeah, it's a new movie. We're not going to compare it to Michael Keaton, but it's still the same characteristics of Batman. Batman has to be a particular way, and it's the same
yeah,
thing with the Crow. Is he has to be a certain way, and if you don't, then it's not the Crow anymore.
yeah. Speaking of the Crow, I watched what was it? I watched Wick is Pain. I watched the documentary about the John Wick movies, and you might have heard this, but the director of John Wick was actually the one who finished The Crow as
Yeah, he was
Brandon
the
Lee.
double. He was the double. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and
Mhm.
it's and he showed, and I was like, what? I was like, and it's the scene where he first becomes the Crow, and that
Yeah,
slow walk
yeah.
to
The
the
lightning's
to the
going, and it
window.
finally
Yeah,
lights his
that was
face.
him. That was actually the director of John Wick doing that walk, and
Yeah.
I was like, oh damn. Like
Mhm.
I was wondering where he was, and then
Mhm.
that was a great documentary. I definitely
Mhm.
recommend Wick is Pain. It's great.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, speaking of the Crow, I liked of the sequels. I felt like the City of Angels was a rehash of basically the first film, except for it's his son.
Just a
I
different
did
guy.
like
Yeah.
Salvation. I did like Salvation. I have a soft spot for Salvation because I like the concept they did with making him the Crow, where he's electrocuted and
Yeah.
the makeup is underneath is from the helmet that he wears,
Right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
you
That
know
he was. Yeah.
I thought
Mhm.
that was cool. And then the fact that he fights dirty cops and one of them just happens to be Walton Goggins of all people. So,
Right. Yeah.
Walton Goggins is a big name, for Fallout and
Well,
whatnot. So,
and I think those. Yeah, I think those films, The Crows, they're underrated because of Brandon Lee. If that hadn't happened to Brandon Lee and they recast him, I think they could hold some weight, and be, remembered. But a lot of people love The Crow, but they had no idea there was sequels to The Crow.
yeah,
A lot of they just know of The Crow and Brandon Lee. But those are good films, and I think they're underrated films.
yeah. Like I said, I'd rather watch that set of films again than the remake. So,
Oh yeah.
hands down, if I had to choose, I'd watch the
I'm
four.
not a guy. I'm not a guy to get up out of a theater and want to walk out, but it was almost pissing me off enough to where I'm like, okay, you know what? I've got my big bag. This is what I do. When I go to theater, I get a big old bag of popcorn like this. That's how serious I am. I'm like, I'm going to take my popcorn and just go home because this is bad.
Yeah, I don't think I ever walked down a movie. I almost did walk out on a movie once, but that was totally different genre. That was Freddy Got Fingered. I hated that movie with a passion. I still do. Um, but the worst movie ever was Dragon Ball Evolution. That's still the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. That
Yeah.
was the worst adaptation of an anime ever. But
Mhm.
yeah, I heard Walton Goggins might be in Street Fighter, so I was like, what?
I heard that too, and I'm excited about Street Fighter, because the original one back in the '90s, which I love it. I love it. I
Yeah,
know it's corny. I know
I
it's
enjoyed
corny.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. I saw it twice in the theaters. So yeah,
yeah,
back in when I was like 15 when it first came out. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was all right. I was like, it's okay from a campy point of view. It's pretty
But
camp.
it's the same with
Like,
Mortal Kombat. If you watch the original Mortal Kombat, I mean, it's campy too. It's corny.
yeah,
He takes. This is where you fall down, and he falls down, and then punches him in the wiener, and it hurts his hand. I mean, and it still had some cheesy dialogue to it too. But for whatever reason, Street Fighter just didn't catch on to where Mortal Kombat. They tried to make a sequel, but it didn't quite work out the way they wanted
oh
it
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty bad. Yeah, the sequel was pretty bad
I mean, you
because it's
can't
like
kill Johnny Cage.
the acting in it was pretty bad. Like, you're alive. Too bad you. Well,
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
who told her to lower the line like that? Like, really?
It was
But
bad. But even most of the cast was recast from the original. Now, when I was a little kid, I was probably, like I said, 6 or 7 when it came out. I thought they were all the same actors. But then I rewatched it years later. I was like, hang on a second. That ain't the same Sonya Blade. That is not the same Johnny Cage. That's not
that's
the
not the
same
same data.
Raiden. They had recast all of them.
Yeah, that's what really messed things up too. But what I
Mhm.
found interesting was I found out later that this stunt double for Robin Shue against the Baraka is Tony Jaa, the guy who started Ombak. Like, I
I
found
didn't
that
know
out
that.
later. I'm like, that was because there was a certain kick that he does to Baraka. And
Mhm.
I'm looking at that and I'm watching Tony Jaa. So I'm like, and I heard that Tony Jaa was a stunt double on Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I realized, oh my God, that's him doing the kick as Robin Shue. And then Ray Park, who played Darth Maul, was actually Raiden's stunt double in his fight
Ah,
in the fight scene.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, in that
yeah,
fight scene where he turned normal again, he's fighting all those. I found out that's Darth Maul fighting him. I'm like, oh snap, that's the guy who played Darth Maul in Star Wars Episode One. That was
Well, that
him.
was the crazy thing with Darth Maul was like he's just a stunt guy for the most part. But I think didn't he play what's the character in X-Men Toad?
Yeah, he was Toad in X Men. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, he's just stunt guy, but whenever you have two big characters like that, Darth Maul and Toad, you don't have to do much acting. Just be a stunt guy, and so that's pretty cool how he got his going. with that, mostly just stunt work. But
Yeah,
even with Mortal Kombat 2, it's like you just killed Johnny Cage, which is a pretty big character, especially in the video game world, right off the bat in the first maybe 10 minutes, if that.
I
I'm like,
know.
man, this is bad. I could
Yeah, that
see,
was
which at the
crazy.
time I didn't care. I was just a little kid, but I could see real fans of the genre or of the franchise being like, "This is bad. Get this out of here."
Yeah, and even the producer said like that real what really ticked me off was the part where Shao Kahn and Liu Kang turn into the dragons and start fighting each other. And then I just found this out like a few weeks ago because I'm watching like 10 movies that were incomplete that were released that the producer
Mhm.
said, yeah, I admit the visual effects were not finished by the time they had to release the film. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me.
I,
Like,
I,
no
I
wonder
mean,
why it looked like
yeah,
utter.
no wonder it was bad. I mean, it looked bad even back then. Yeah, I mean, that was bad visual effects even for the 90s.
That's as bad as the Rock as a Scorpion King in Mummy Returns, like that bad CGI.
Oh,
Oh
I
God.
remember that. Yeah, I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is that? Like, the
This is
video game of the Mummy looked better than the character in the movie.
this is why I absolutely love practical effects more than CGI effects because it's like back then they did them right for a while, but then they just destroyed it at all costs. I'm like, oh my God. The worst
Yeah.
I ever saw was a horror film called Hyenas.
Hmm.
And it's about these females who turn into hyenas and they start attacking people. And there's this one scene where two of the hyenas go into combat to see who's going to become the alpha. And when I saw them fight, and I was just like, I just put my head. I'm like, what is this crap? I was like, this looks so bad. This looks like something that came out of American Werewolf in Paris. And I'm like, oh my God, no ever. I'm like, please, 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 just stick with the. Like, I'm
Well,
done. At that
I'm
point, I
glad
was like,
you,
I'm done with CGI. I'm like, I can't. I'll watch like really. I mean, I'll watch still movies with bad CGI, but at least they know it's intentionally funny. Like,
right.
there's a filmmaker out in California named Dustin Ferguson. He makes these low budget horror and action films. His low budget horror films, he purposely uses CGI and makes and his intention is to make these like, you're supposed to laugh at this. And he even has a movie called Big Bad CGI Monsters. I mean, that's the level. Like he knows that people are either going to hate it or just say, you know what, this is meant to be funny, and this is why I love his work because he
Well,
knows what the audience likes and it's their
yeah, I'm
intention.
glad you mentioned that, though. I'm glad you mentioned that because it seems like fans nowadays will accept cheesy practical effects. That obviously looks cheesy. I mean, the Terrifier had some cheesy moments too. That
Yeah,
it was like, oh, that looked kind of fake. It's nasty, but still looked fake, right?
yeah,
Then they will not accept bad VFX. Will not. I mean, if you've got bad VFX, you are doomed. And that was what I was thinking with Hands of Hell was let's just do all practical. Let's make it almost seem like a 70s or 80s movie of how we do the practical effects. And because we'll be forgiven if it looks cheesy than if we try to do VFX and it looks bad.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. Oh, and literally right before our interview, I was actually rewatching. You remember a 1987 film called Street Trash? I don't
I've
know if you
heard
ever
of
heard
it,
of it.
but I can't recall seeing it.
All
Mhm.
right, so they did a spiritual sequel that came out last year, and he doesn't call it a reboot. The director said no, it's not a reboot. It's a spiritual sequel. It's in the same universe, but it's set years into the future. It's set in Cape Town, South Africa, in the year 2050.
Mhm.
And instead of alcohol, they're using a nerve gas to get rid of the homeless people.
Mhm.
He did the most ingenious thing. He won up the filmmakers. He shot the film on 35 millimeter film
Mhm.
and used
Mhm.
all practical effects. He wanted to pay homage to the original 80s style of
Right.
filmmaking.
Mhm.
And this it's on Tubi right now. I was literally just rewatching it. And when I first saw it, I just went, holy crap. I'm like, this is how you make an 80s style horror film. Shoot
Mhm.
the film on if you can, get the 35 millimeter and shoot
Right. Yeah.
and do it. And he did
Yeah.
just he goes, for me, that was probably one of the most difficult things shooting on 35 millimeter because he told me that everyone's got to be quiet. You can't.
Mhm.
It's not like digital where you can just take out the background noise. You've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
be really quiet on the set. I am so glad I had a team that was very supportive of what my intention was. They
Mhm.
did their job, and this movie. I mean, this movie's is just as good as I seen the original just before the new one. I'm like, this is just as good as the original, hands
Yeah.
down. It was like awesome.
And it's not to discredit filmmakers nowadays. Everybody, they're very, very talented, but it just shows how talented filmmakers were in the past to be able to shoot these films with the sound stuff. They have not be able to digitally go in and do a whole lot of removing and editing. You know, what you capture is what you've got, pretty much, type thing. And it's very impressive to be able to see what they've done in the past. You know, versus now it's a little bit easier, so to say, but they're still equally as talented. But back then, it's like you had to be spot on.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one instance where I think it was in 1984. There was a guy who was shooting a martial arts film in New York City, and he was a big like kung fu star of the '70s.
Hmm.
And he didn't finish the film. He ran out of money, and he just said, "I'm leaving. I'm done. I'm done." He
Hmm.
never finished the film. And then a couple of years back, I think it was like 2019, I had heard that Vinegar Syndrome, they
Hmm.
bought these bunch of reels
Hmm.
for the to because they're a distribution company, and
Right. Hmm.
the guy found this movie that was incomplete,
Hmm.
and he was looking at it. He saw the reels. There was all the notes. They didn't
Hmm.
finish the sound, and he goes, "Holy crap! I think I'm onto something here." He
Hmm.
asked the owners. He showed him what he got. And he goes, I want to recut I want to make this film, get this film
Hmm.
released." So they gave
Hmm.
him $2 million. He spent 2 years editing everything, making sure he followed the notes that he saw. He
Hmm.
casted a B movie cast to do the voiceovers. He casted like Donna
Right.
Dragon Wilson, Cynthia Rothrock,
Hmm.
Ginger Lynn Allen,
Hmm.
Matt Midler from the Mutilator, like to do the
Right.
voiceovers. And he hired a company, a band called Voyager to do the music to make it
Hmm.
give it that '80s synth sound. And the movie just came out a few years ago called New York Ninja.
Interesting. Well, that's cool how that works. Like, what are the odds that he got that? But also, that the guy way back then had something. He just ran out of money.
Yeah, and then they actually found him. They found a guy, and he's like, we found your film. We're gonna
Mhm.
recut the film. I mean, do you want to get involved in it? And he's just like, no, I'm done. I'm retired. But you know what? I will give
Mhm.
you my blessing. Do what you want with the movie. Just do it. Just go ahead.
Oh,
They
yeah.
said they had found him in like in Vietnam where he was living, and he was like, I'm
So
not. He goes, I'm not involved in films anymore. But
mhm.
I'll give you my full blessing. You guys can release the film.
Just goes to show you never know what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. And I love these. I love looking for like this lost media. I just pre-ordered one called Arbor Day that's coming out
Mhm.
after like 35 years. They're really. I just ordered the.
Mhm.
It was it's like a old slasher film
Oh,
that was released. I think it was the guys from Wisconsin or Wyoming. I can't remember where.
mhm.
And TerraVision's releasing the Blu-ray this year after like 35 years with the full
Oh,
support of the
wow.
director.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
I got that coming in. I love that's what I love looking for now. Like these lost movies or these
Yeah.
movies you never heard of, and like
Yeah.
I was like, you just gotta get them and check them out.
Yeah, you just never know what you got, and you never know what you're going to find that you may enjoy, and that's what I tell people that a lot of people complain about Hollywood nowadays. They hate Hollywood. Everything sucks. Acting sucks. They've got hidden messages and stuff, all this and that. Well, it's like, well, instead of complaining about it and continuing to do the same thing over and over, you got a whole nother world in the independent world, and you never know what you may find there. You may find garbage, which you're already complaining about garbage in Hollywood. You know, you never know what you may find a gem in that, in that independent world. It's the same with like restaurants. We got the big brand chains, McDonald's, Whataburger, all that stuff. People complain about it. Well, go to that mom and pop. You never know. You might like it there, type thing. Just try
Yeah,
something
exactly.
new. We're programmed in today's society to kind of just do what everybody else does. And everybody's watching this film or they're watching these, wearing these clothes, they're doing this or doing that. And it's like, step back for a second and just go venture this way. Just see, you complain about Hollywood. There's a whole independent section on most streaming platforms. Go down there and see what you got.
And there's also a company called Visual Vengeance. They're part of Wild Eye, and they shot on video cinema back of the '80s and '90s.
Mhm.
They're starting to re-release them with the support of the filmmakers. And I had interviewed a few of these filmmakers, and one of them had an interesting film in '91 called "L.A. AIDS Jabber" was the name of the movie.
Huh.
That's literally the title. And he
Mhm.
had told me like, yeah, I didn't just like make this film. I actually self-distributed it. I made like so many copies on VHS, did this professional, and I used to send them to the mom and pop video stores back in the '90s.
Ah, there you
And
go. Yeah. I see.
yeah,
I
and
never even
that's
thought
what
of
he
that.
did. That's
Yeah.
what he did back in
Yeah.
then. He self-distributed the films himself,
Yeah.
And then Visual Vengeance picked it up, like when they first launched this label. This was like one of the titles they got, and he's like, "Yeah, I've talked to Visual Vengeance. They said, yeah, we got the film. You know, we want to work with you and remaster it for Blu-ray, and do interviews. Who can you contact?" And they got these awesome special collector DVDs that like Blu-rays that has not only the film, but you could, they have interviews with the filmmakers now, or some of the actors involved, comment. And I started collecting these, and I'm like, there's so many good like old school movies like like people never heard of.
Yeah.
And then they're just like oh, like when did this come out in like the 80s or 90s, like they were shot on video, these guys distributed the film themselves.
Mhm.
And then here they are getting this now, and it's getting a following.
Yeah, I never even thought of that before. I guess that's the equivalent, before self-distributing to a degree on, Prime and stuff like that, but doing it on VHS. I never even thought of people doing that back then. So that's pretty impressive and pretty thinking outside the box to say, well, I've got this movie, don't know how to get, because back then there wasn't a bunch of independent distributors. It's like, well, how do I
Right.
get this movie to Paramount or to whoever? And it was probably very more difficult back then than it is now. And then to come up with the idea of, oh, I'll just make a bunch of copies, go to mom and pop video stores. Like, damn, that's pretty damn smart.
Yeah, nowadays you got like Wild Eye releasing, Visual Vengeance. You got Troma's another one who could, who they don't just produce their films, they also do distribution. They just picked up they just got the rights to, like, I think it was Shapiro Glickenhaus Entertainment. So and like so now they're now the official distributors of like these old 90s martial arts flicks, like that start Billy Blanks and Cynthia Rothrock. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they just did a documentary about like that acquisition a while back, and it's called American Expendables. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just amazing. And and then you got these other independent filmmakers who are, they worked with I'm trying to think of another one. Uncorked Entertainment's another indie
Mhm.
outlet.
Oh, yeah. Uncork. Yeah, I know about them. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad like we're getting more of these like independent style labels that are making like bringing this indie cinema out to everyone. So I'm glad, like, and then of course you have Tubi, and
Yeah.
everyone's like, you gotta go to Tubi. And there's another one I just heard about called Spark TV. I got a filmmaking friend in North Carolina, and
Mhm.
she's releasing all of her films on there, like through
Mhm.
that platform. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Tubi's a big thing. Tubi, that's a good one. But also they're very, friendly to indie filmmakers. Not all platforms are as friendly to indie filmmakers, depending on the quality and stuff like that. And some of them, it's if you're not union or SAG, they may not even look at you at all, type thing. So Tubi's good for indie filmmakers.
yeah, definitely. Like
Mhm.
I love that all these like indie films are getting more of a following now than it was back then.
I just wonder, is that because of the quality, or is it because of people being tired and the political stuff of Hollywood?
I think it's a combo of both in a way. And for me, for my personal opinion, I think it's like my personal opinion and my personal experience. I feel
Mhm.
it's a combo of the two. Like I've always loved. I grew up in the B movie era of
Right. Mhm.
cinema, so that was always been my shtick. But
Mhm.
I also like A-list films, but
Mhm.
you know a lot of the A-list films, they're just countlessly doing the same old shtick and the same
Yeah.
old stories or and whatnot. And it's just like, it's okay to do the same story, but change a few things here and there,
Right.
or it's gonna just get tiring, and like it's gonna turn people off eventually.
Well, it just
Like
seems
with
like there's
Final,
nothing that really pushes the story.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, like with Final Destination Bloodlines, I like what they did with that concept, bringing a family dynamic in the twist. I mean, I felt like that was something different. It wasn't the
Right.
same old thing we were used to. I like that it added the whole generational family aspect, and I thought that
Right.
was something fresh that
Right.
worked. Like I mentioned earlier with Slumber Party Massacre 2021, they did something different. They actually made it what the original was intended to be. It wasn't a run by the number slasher film. It was a satire of slashers, and they gender reversed the tropes. Like that's
Right.
what I like. I like to see something different with it. And they did put Easter eggs from the first two films. Like you actually see a guy holding a guitar that just happened to
Mhm.
be the same guitar the slasher and the killer in Slumber Party Massacre 2 had without the drill bit.
Well, and so I mentioned that to someone, and it's the same with the Texas Witch. If you're watching, there's certain things that may not make complete sense right now. And I got inspiration from that because I love films that kind of have a thriller aspect to them. And of course the Saw films, I love those to where they'll tell you something in one particular film and it has nothing to do with that film. You won't find out what that means until probably the next film. And one of the first times I recognized them doing that was in Saw 3. He's sitting in the bed and he had a bowl of wax and he was pouring it on what looked like a tape, and you just kind of dismiss it as well, I don't know what he's doing, you know. And then in the fourth film, when they're doing his autopsy, he cuts his stomach open, and when they find his stomach, it's the tape in there, and it's basically explaining how this is going to continue. That even though I'm dead, I'm not done. And you can see it through the Saw films where they'll do certain things, and it has you'll never know what it is in that film, but in the future it will. And some movie viewers, they may not pay much attention to that kind of stuff to where it's storytelling. You know, it's building that story for the future, but also letting you kind of tell your own story. Because just like the book aspect, whatever you think it is the best idea. So if you see, oh, well, this is why Piper did that. Well, that's your opinion of it. So that means that's the best idea that's out there. And then if I make a sequel and it's not lined up to what you thought it was, well, now it's a bad idea. Just like books and stuff like that. But I like that part of things to where it adds a new element, but kind of lets the audience decide what it is, you know. Um, and with the Final Destination films, it kind of comes full circle. Is they got stale. There was nothing that pushed that story forward. It was the same thing. Someone cheated death, and eventually death comes back. They're all going to die. Horrible, just terrible, outrageous ways. And eventually, as an audience, it's like, well, it comes back to competition. I've got Final Destination, or I've got this over here. Well, I already know what they're going to do, so I'm going to go over here. You
Yep.
know, and I think that's something that kept the Conjuring, the Annabelles, the Nun, that universe going, is that each one's a different story that's not piggybacking off of the previous story. They're each their own individual stories, but being told in one grand story of I forget the two investigators' names.
Oh,
Uh, yeah,
Ed and Lorraine.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Ed and
yeah,
Lorraine. You know, in their adventures, but you know, it progresses the story because each one is a new one. You know, it pushes the story to where Final Destination kind of gets old. Saw even got old for a while, I think, with the seventh or eighth films. It's kind of like, okay, well, they can't even escape their own traps because now he's a different type of serial killer because Jigsaw's dead, and when he puts them in a trap, they can't get out. And so you know that as a fan going into it, like, well, whatever I'm about to see, they're not getting out of it. They're dead. You know, to where in
yeah.
the previous films, it's like, well, there's a chance they live. So now you build up anticipation. Final Destination is like, well, they're not getting out of it. But they played around with it with the guy. Have you seen it yet with the new one?
Which one?
Kind of Bloodline.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. So it's like the guy with the nose ring. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, he's going to die. And they played around with him for
Oh
so
yeah, that
long.
was.
You know, and as a fan, I'm like, I know he's gonna die. What are you doing? You know, and
Yeah,
then
but
they
like,
turn.
and ironically, you know what? He had in my opinion, he had the best death of the movie. Like in my opinion, that was the best one. But I
That
will
was
tell you,
yeah, yeah.
when I saw Bloodlines, I'm not gonna lie, the last thing that Tony Todd said, I know that was completely ad libbed, and because he was getting sick.
Oh,
I
that'll
am not
get you
gonna
like this,
lie,
like ooh, getting
I am
emotional.
not gonna. Yeah, I almost started
Yeah,
like I was about to bawl after what he said. Like, oh my god,
yeah,
like. And but it's funny, he still has a couple movies and like they're supposed to be coming out like
right.
on the indie circuit. I saw one called Werewolf Game that came out
Yeah.
in January. That was it was good. It was pretty good where he played the judge.
Mhm.
Saw Cutter's Club, and I think he has a few more, including one with Jigsaw, Tobin Bell. I think he has like a sci-fi. He did a sci-fi movie with him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the
Yeah,
crazy thing. Like you think Tobin Bell and Saul, you're like, well, why is he doing indie work? He does a lot of independent films.
that's what I like. I like about these names who are like, they're big in horror, like they do A-list horror, but then
Yeah,
they like to do the B-list horror films now and again.
yeah,
They love doing it. Like, or they're still, they'll take a break from doing horror, and then they'll come back and do horror. Like,
yeah,
look at, I'm gonna give example, Linnea Quigley. She's best known for Return of the Living Dead. She was in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, but then she
yeah,
took a break in the early 90s in the comedies. She
yeah.
did a couple comedy films. She did Vice Academy and
Mhm.
Virgin High, and then she went back to doing horror. And now
Mhm.
she's back. Now she does horror like once occasionally. She'll return to do a horror film. And I think
Yeah.
she's doing her own sequel to Return to Living Dead like that's getting like crowdfunded, and
Yeah.
you know, so I'm all for that. Like I love, and
What?
Brink Stevens is still doing as I mentioned, the guy I mentioned earlier, Dustin Ferguson, she's in a couple of his like his films, and I'm trying to think what Felissa Rose I mentioned still doing horror films.
Mhm.
Kelly Maroney still doing horror films now and again. So like you got these classic scream queens who are still like, I love it, and they, but at the same time, while they're still loving the genre, they're actually supporting the new generation of the scream
Right.
queens. Like
Exactly.
like I feel like she's going to be one of them. Gianna, I feel, is going to be like one of the big new screen queens the way she's going, because
Gianna's
she's
Gianna
amazing
is
in these new
amazing.
films.
Yeah, Gianna's amazing, and you can see her versatility in acting as far as from Hands of Hell, which is the killer psycho, to someone that is the good guy basically, and I keep pushing her. Everybody has their things and motivations, and I try to tell her, listen, girl, I love you to death. We've known each other a long time now. You got to keep going at this thing. You can write. I mean, she does it all. She can write, act, all these things. She's very, very
She,
talented and very, very
she
gifted.
reminds me of a friend of mine from South Africa, of an actress I know in South Africa,
Mhm.
named Lisa Laylers, and she does it all too. She she's actually a filmmaker of document, like she does documentaries and short films, but
Mhm.
she's acted in two horror films. And like
Mhm.
Gianna, the first one she played the killer. It was called Friend Request,
Mhm.
and then she's actually the final girl in Triggered, the movie I mentioned
Right.
earlier. So she
Mhm.
plays her, and she's like the innocent, quiet type. But then,
Mhm.
because of the game, she has to gain the confidence she needs to try to
Mhm.
survive, and but try to see who else she can keep alive, hopefully. Although
Right.
it's only supposed to be, but she also, but in Friend Request, she played this outcast who, like, she kills herself because a friend, like, she thought this one girl's a friend,
Mhm.
and she killed herself, and then she comes back as this freaking demon who's killing the girl's
Mhm.
friends one by one.
Mhm.
And it was just like insane. And then she was telling me, yeah, when I first did this movie, I wasn't intending to be the demon. I didn't think I was going to play the demon, because
Mhm.
I'm only 5'2", but they had me stand on stilts. They put me under all this heavy makeup, and I had
Mhm.
to learn. And I was like, I absolutely love that role. And then, ironically, she that movie inspired her to become a psychology major, and she got her master's degree in psychology after doing that movie, because the movie's set in a college environment.
Right.
And just, but like Jonna, she does everything. She's even a singer and songwriter over there. Like, it's
Yeah.
just mind blowing.
Like Jonna, so like it's ironic or interesting how it all turned out was like, so Jonna doesn't like horror movies. Jonna doesn't watch horror movies. She was like that wasn't her thing. And so when me and her teamed up, we were in I met her in Blanco, and I was telling her, she was talking about how she wants to produce. She's done a lot of like things on, I guess the ID channel. She was doing stuff like those true crime reenactment things. And she was like, she loves acting, but she wants to produce her own things and stop working for other people. And I'm like, yeah, that's ultimately my goal. And she was like, well, what genre are you in? I was like, well, I want to do horror because I think it's the most forgiving, but also the most profitable in the thing. And especially if you're going to get going early, it's like, well, I'm still trying to figure out the industry. I'm still trying to figure out filmmaking. So I want to do horror. And she's like, oh, I hate horror. I don't do horror. I was like, oh, well, you know, I guess we can't work together. And she's like, well, let me write something. What do you have an idea? And I told her, yeah. So I have this story that I want to write. I need a writer. And that's what she was. And I said, it's called The Texas Witch. And she was like, and I told her kind of the plot points and things. She's like, well, let me write it just to see what happens. I was like, okay, let's write it. And she wrote it and she's like, well, what do you think? And I was like, we got some tightening up, but I was like, it's good, especially for someone that doesn't mess with horror. And it turned out that she's a natural, whether it's acting in it or writing in it. And I told her, I was like, well, maybe you have a little bit more deranged inner, soul than what you want to let out as far as a person goes to be able to write this stuff and come up with these ideas, which it's a joke. I love her to death. It's just she's very talented and she can do it all no matter what it is. But she may have
Yeah,
found her thing in horror, whether she wanted it or not.
she totally reminds me of this one actress I spoke with. She did this horror film called That's a Wrap, and she's been in the movies. She's been in movies for like 30 years, and she was like, so I interviewed her about this horror film, and she goes, I have a confession to make. I don't like horror movies. I like making them. I don't like watching them. Like, the littlest drop of blood will make me squirm. But I just found that so ironic. Like that's so ironic that you like making the horror films, yet you
Mhm.
don't watch them. And but I get it. It's acting, and
Yeah.
it's a totally different
Well, it's
world. And
turning
at
over
least
that
you,
stone. You never know what's under
yeah,
that stone unless you check out what's under it. And she never thought, oh, let me look under this horror stone, because she's former military. She was in the Navy, and so she kind of doesn't like to be necessarily, what would you call it? I guess aroused through, violence, so to say. So it was
yeah,
never really her thing. And then she dabbled in it, and it turned out, oh, she's really, really good at it. And so you never know what you're going to be good at until you give it try. And that's what she did. And I think whatever she sets her mind to, she'll be able to do it.
yeah. And I think, like I said, at this rate, I think she's going to be another. She could be one of the new screen queens. Like there's some great talent out there nowadays with the horror genre. I can name a couple right now, like Jamie Bernadette and Sarah French. Like these two for me are they're like the Linnea Quigleys and Felissa Roses of our generation now, the
Right.
millennials, because they do such a good job
Mhm.
in their horror films, and
Right.
and they both done other genre films,
Right.
but they're amazing with with horror films as well. And Jamie was in she was actually in the official sequel to I Spit on Your Grave. She actually
Oh
played
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, she played Camilla Keaton's daughter in that one, and
Mhm.
I'd spoken to her about that. And
Mhm.
um, Sarah is just knocking it out of the park. She's actually a producer now too. She
Mhm.
produced That's a Wrap, and she has two more coming out this year.
Mhm.
Brute 1986, which is inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, by
Right.
the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and Garden of Eden, which I heard is
Mhm.
I heard it's really insane. So
Mhm.
I I feel like those two are gonna be like they're
Right.
like the new generation screen queen. So I'm glad then Gianna's going to be up there too at this rate. She
Oh,
keeps going like
yep.
this.
She'll get there. She'll keep doing it. She works hard. She gets after it every day.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, where can people watch the Texas Witch now? Where can
Yeah.
they?
So right now, big thing. I'm pushing it on Prime, but it's also on Fandango, which is also they bought out what was it?
Voodoo?
Voodoo. Yeah, they brought out Voodoo. So Fandango next week or next month it goes on all the AVOD. So it'll be on Tubi. It's going to be on the CW. All those platforms there. And each month we're going to add a few more different platforms to it. Instead of kind of all at once, it's going to be through a process just to kind of get every type of audience, over a course of, you know, the summer.
Awesome, and hopefully we'll get Hands of Hell also
Yeah,
later
that'll
this
hopefully
year.
be later this. I want it this summer, but they're still working on it, so we'll see what happens with that one. But if you follow us on social media, Hands of Hell's on Facebook, Instagram. Same with Texas Witch. I keep those pages going, and then my personal pages. So we'll announce it there whenever it's time to get a re-release of Hands of Hell.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely put the link in the description. And
Mhm.
Andrew, man, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been great talking to you.
Awesome, man. Let's do it again. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we definitely got to do this again. So
Absolutely.
anyway, take care and stay awesome as always.
Yes, sir. You too, man. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye bye.